Hi guys, it's Paul from Modcon here. This is my latest build, Ju88A-5 from Revell. From the A1 and the A4 kits, I'll be producing a Ju88A-5, which actually preceded the A4 onto the production line. The two kits provide all the parts you need, and I'll be using the A1's engines, propellers, spinners, and fin and rudder arrangements, along with the A4's extended wingtips and the extended ailerons, as well as the rear-facing machine guns. So, moving on to the first part of the build. Here we have the tail wheel assembly, the bulkhead, and the tail wheel leg itself. The wheel retainer is in two pieces. One of the sides is attached to the leg and the other is actually a separate piece. This makes the extension here that you can see rather vulnerable to getting broken off, and indeed I achieved that quite quickly after inserting it here, but it's a relatively easy thing to sort. I found both internally and externally the detail on the kit was really rather good. And this is, although rather hidden, one of the examples you can see here in the tail wheel assembly. So these are the engines with a little bit of filler applied at the front, and here the wings with the extensions, and as I said earlier, these will also have the extended ailerons attached to them as well. And coming up here also the nacelles, which are relatively straightforward, and indeed the early style fin and rudder arrangement. And coming up next, a test run, a dry run I should say, on the fuselage halves to see how well they fit together, and just removing some of the connection points from the sprue that were still on the airframe. So, putting these two bits together and lining them up, you can see here that it's a wee bit neat fitting. Obviously if I aligned it properly that would help, but as I say, it's wide at the back as you can see, and that will need a little bit of attention. And indeed here is that attention with the fuselage now fully taped up at the back and the front in order to keep the upper decking in position. A little bit of filler was needed in this area. There is some slight gapping of the work after the filler has been sanded smooth and tidied up. The insert was actually a little bit awkward as well to get to sit properly. With a bit of perseverance, it is possible to bring everything together. Some of the underside detail would need to be rescribed. And here is the said tail wheel retainer that broke off. That will be addressed shortly. This is the cockpit floor painted up and with a little bit of black wash. I deliberately left the seats off until the end of the build so that they didn't get knocked about and damaged. And this is the forward nose section with the bulkhead and radio equipment at the back and the side panels, as well as the front upper nose cap. And last but not least, oh sorry, it's not last yet, this is the instrument panel with the transfer from the kit actually. It came up looking quite good. And the wings with the wheel wells painted up as well. And all the leading edge and wingtip detail smoothed out. This is a dry run of the lower fuselage and lower nose piece. This needed quite a bit of work done to it to bring it into proper alignment. But none of these issues are really any problem to even a relatively inexperienced modeller. And a dry run for the wings. There is quite a bit of gapping at the leading edge of the wing where it connects with the fuselage, but the wing's saving grace is that both of them fit very snugly and produce the correct alignment for dihedral, thankfully. And once the nacelles are on, the engine should sit around about here. And talking of nacelles, that's what I'm doing now, adding the first of the two. This is the right side. There's again a bit of gapping at the back on the undersurface and at the connection on the upper surface. And these were attended to as I went along. It's quite an awkward area here with the curve over the top of the nacelle and then the insert at either side. And when you're sanding that, you have to pay quite a bit of attention to getting the right reproduction of the curve in that particular area, because you want them to blend quite smoothly, one to the other. Now, this shows the fuselage with the forward section attached. And the nacelles have been blended in. The landing light was added in as well and sanded smooth to make it conform better to the shape of the wing, which obviously made it opaque, but that can be tidied up later on in the build. Also, here are the flaps and ailerons that will be used, and the horizontal tailplane pieces. The wheels, I changed the colour of the tyre slightly, and the engines are now tidied up. And undercarriage legs just need a little bit of remedial work done on the legs as far as painting is concerned. And now here I have attached the left wing, just tidying up the joint, and excuse me, having used tube cement for that, as I always do, I back it up with a little bit of liquid cement, which also helps to remove any excess glue along the join. And the same again for the underside connection point. And I'm happy with that. And the opposite wing has now been attached, as has the flap. Now the flap has a slight actuator arm, and you cannot drop the flap as you see it here if you leave that arm in place. You've got to break it off, but keep the part because you'll need it. Once you've broken it off, as you'll notice here on the piece I'm going to attach, you can get it properly into position. The blister at the back, the blister on the flap I should say, when deployed in real life, moved slightly inwards underneath the opening at the back of the nacelle. So that's what I'm doing now in this section. Just using a little bit of liquid cement to attach the flap to the back of the nacelle, and then I will turn the kit not upside down, I'll turn it the right way up, and again run a little bit of liquid cement along the edge of the flap where it meets the trailing edge of the wing. The filler in the wing joints and the base of the fin is It's called, what is it called? Perfect Plastic Putty, and it's a water-based filler, and it comes in really handy for doing this sort of work, and you can wipe off any excess with a cotton bud, dampened cotton bud, if you're inclined to use it. But it does joins very well without having lots of scraping and scratching to do with sandpaper. So that small piece of plastic on my finger that you saw there is the actuator arm for the flap, and I'm just repositioning that piece back in under the left wing. All that's really needed is a steady hand and a little bit of liquid cement. And that's it in place there. And you'll also notice the gondola is in place. I omitted to mention that a little bit further back. Unfortunately, it's a combination of plastic and transparent pieces. It might have been better if Revell had made it entirely transparent, and then you could just have painted your way around one piece. I find trying to get separate transparencies in such a small space to be quite awkward. But once it's assembled, it does look the part. So just doing the ailerons here, and that really will bring me to the conclusion of most, not all, but most of the construction, and starting on the paintwork soon. First up will be an undercoat, as ever, and then you'll see the undersides. Here we go. You'll see the undersides being painted pale blue over the black paint that I use as pre-shading. Then the fuselage sides and the upper surfaces. So I'll take a break just now and I'll come back to you shortly. So that's the colour scheme up and running, and I'm really liking the way that the sand scheme in particular on the upper surfaces has come out. All the colours are used over the black pre-shading, and then a couple of additional coats are given on top of that, just to blend out the black and just leave it ghosting through at the end of the process. And here now is the upper surface completed, and I think looking rather smart. Excuse me. The undersurfaces are also complete and keep up really well. And the green is coming along quite nicely, but it did need a little extra application after this point. And now with one of the painted engine cells, we get a better idea of how the model will look as it draws to a conclusion. Still a wee bit to go yet though. So now the Mediterranean theatre bands have been applied. The pre-shading will need to be reapplied onto the white areas, but that should be easy enough to do. The green has been tidied up now on the fuselage sides, and all in all, it's turned out rather well. As indeed have the engines. Looking quite nice and smart. So, next up, the canopies. This is the main windshield and the nose section. These were all hand painted, and they were given firstly a coat of medium grey, left to dry overnight, and then the same sunshade as on the airframe was applied with a very small thin brush, very slowly and carefully. I'm not one for using masks for transparencies. I tried that once and had a terrible fight on my hands. I've never recovered. So now the beginning of the undercarriage legs. These are quite tricky because the ones at the back go in at an awkward angle. So you're better to do as I'm doing here and put the rear section in first, and then the main section, and just draw the two together on the supporting arm as I'm doing here. And again, once using tube glue, I tidy up the join with a little bit of liquid cement. You can tell that bottle's running low. I have to keep tipping it over to get some glue onto the brush. But it was a successful routine. And coming up after this section, we have the state of play as it is at present. The model is up on its wheels. The propellers, which aren't currently fixed, are in place, and the model has been given a coat of gloss varnish and looking very nice indeed. And just to show some of the detail in more close up, a couple of shots of the upper and under surfaces. The slight sheen on the surface is partly drying varnish, and also there's a little bit of stippling effect because I think my airbrush hadn't quite been cleaned properly and it was sort of splitting varnish out towards the end of the process, but that will be addressed when the final coat goes on, and that will be a satin mix. Under surfaces now are just ready for the next stage, which will be attaching the bomb racks and the bombs, and that's coming up shortly. So guys, that's us at the end of the build now, with the attachment of this last bomb and a few other sundry items. At the end of this section of video there will be 4 photographs of the completed model, upper and undersides, which I hope you will find of interest. I would like to thank you for following along as ever. I hope you've enjoyed the build, and I'm just letting you know that there will be no models and no videos. Next month, that's October, I hope to have some time away from modelling and doing a few other things, catching up with other things, and I'll be back at the end of the month or the beginning of November, and I will have some hopefully interesting kits to bring you between then and the turn of the year. So until then, please look after yourselves, and I will catch up with you in the very near future. Thanks again for looking in. Cheers. Bye.